I introduce Robert, who obviously with AI is such a big conversation, and we were just saying that there's a real shift in energy around thinking about how we assess candidates, and it's going to remain a theme within ISE for a while. So Robert, over to you.
Sarah. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. I think this is my 9th ISE conference. So as you'll see on there, my name's Robert Newry. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Arctic Shores. And in a sign of the times, my job description now includes host of a podcast, the TA Disruptors, and I'll be sharing actually some of the clips from that podcast. But today I'm going to talk to you about the AI-enabled candidate, and that term, the AI-enabled candidate, is a very important one. Because for the first time now, we have candidates that have the same power and access to technology as all of you do as recruiters. And today I'm going to share 3 things with you. First, for those of you that were here at the ISE conference last year, you will remember how the topic of ChatGPT and the arrival of GenAI landed like a bomb at that conference, and it was the talk of the whole 2 days there. So the first thing is, well, how have some of those predictions that we heard last year played out? Second thing I'm going to talk to you about is how did the early careers team and sectors, or teams and sectors, react to the arrival of ChatGPT and the impact that we thought it was going to make. And then third, I'm going to share some hot off the press new research that we've done at Arctic Shores about what's the state of play today in terms of use of ChatGPT and GenAI tools, and what some tips and takeaways of what I think that will mean for all of you here in terms of the next 12 months. But before I get to that, just a little bit of background about Arctic Shores. I set it up 10 years ago, and the purpose today is exactly the same as it was 10 years ago, which is how can we help uncover potential and enable organizations to see more in people. And that uncovering potential is a really, really important part of the Arctic Shores mission. It's not just about measuring potential, it is discovering it and learning things about people that sometimes they didn't even know. And I like to share that point through the story of the lovely Elizabeth that you will see on the screen here. Now, Elizabeth was the standout candidate from the very first cohort that went through the Arctic Shores task-based assessment back in 2015. And Deloitte actually were the first organization willing to go and experiment with this very different and new type of assessment. And as it happens, the person who was in charge of this scheme at Deloitte at the time was the lovely Georgia Greer, who many of you probably know from the ISE. But the story about Elizabeth is a special one, because she was a farmer's daughter, left school at 17, had average grades. University wasn't something that was going to be open to her. So she ended up as a recruitment consultant. But she knew she could do more. She knew she had more to be able to offer the world of work than just being, there's nothing wrong with being a recruitment consultant, but if you know you can do more, then why shouldn't you be able to realize that ambition? And what Deloitte said was, we really don't care what your educational background is. We're not looking for a degree. We're not looking for a set of results. We're going to use psychometric assessment to uncover and discover what your potential is. And if you're keen to learn things, if you're resilient, then please apply. And so she applied. She was absolutely amazing in terms of her learning agility, determination, resilience. This is what we uncovered. She learned things about herself that she didn't know how good she was at those things. She sailed through the process, and 8 years on, is still at Deloitte and is now a senior client executive there. There are many, many stories that I could tell of other people who we've helped uncover their potential, but that really is what Arctic Shores is about. In the last 10 years, we've won 5 awards. We're up for another award tonight, so hopefully I will be updating this slide tomorrow. 100 media mentions from The Guardian to the BBC Technology Click show. 2.5 million people have been through our task-based assessment, 45 different countries. But the thing that I'm most proud about is that 50,000 or so uncovered potentials have found jobs as a result of the 300 organizations or so that we've worked with. But I'm going to talk about AI now. And I like this Bill Gates reference. I mean, if anybody should know what a major shift in technology is about, then it should be Bill Gates. And he was unequivocal that in his lifetime, OpenAI and ChatGPT was the second biggest thing that he's ever come across. And that is backed up by the adoption of ChatGPT. So it took Instagram 12 months to get to 100 million users. It took TikTok 9 months to get to 100 million users. ChatGPT did it in 2 months. 2 months to have 100 million users. Now, what that means is that everybody is using it. And so very quickly, a year ago, when people were sort of talking about ChatGPT and what's it going to mean, people were still trying to figure out, how's it going to help me in my life? And there were loads of hacks and tips coming out about everything from how you might improve your weekly recipe to how you might improve your health. But very quickly, it turned to job applications. And if any of you haven't delved into the TikTok world of job applications and what is going on there, then I've got a few clips here which I'll share with you. You can go and see afterwards. It is awash with tips and hacks on how you can ace job applications. And here is just a few of them.
Here's how to use ChatGPT to answer video interview questions. So I took a standard competency-based question. Now this is more like it.
Then I'm taking the job description, then putting it into ChatGPT like this, then getting practice questions, and then asking it for example answers like this.
Best AI tool for generating assessment questions? No, it's not ChatGPT, and it's totally free.
I used AI to get me a callback from every job I applied to. Now, if you're already like mid to senior level in your field, you probably won't need ChatGPT's help for this. But if you're like me, where you've worked in multiple fields over a significant amount of time, this is going to be helpful. Given my diverse background, please list the top 9 key competencies that would highlight blank. Your skill set.
3 AI tools that help you find, prep, and land a better job. All right, number 1 is going to be Teal. Teal is bomb. And if you're looking for a tool that uses AI.
So you can get lost forever, actually, in the world of TikTok, finding tips there. I mean, there are apps now like Apply AI, which is one of the first ones we showed there, where it will apply for 5,000 jobs while you sleep by customizing your CV, your cover letter to the job description that is out there on Indeed or any of the other job boards. So the point about ChatGPT and OpenAI is that it's like a calculator. It is ubiquitous. Everybody, pretty well everybody, will have access to it. But it's better than a calculator because it's friendly and it's very knowledgeable. And everybody now has access to it on their phone as well. And it's so easy to use. And that's the point of the analogy here about a calculator. It is really, really easy to use. And it is your sort of personal chatbot. So with that kind of background in there, last year and throughout much of this year, people in TA have been asking themselves 2 big questions. How much is this going to change our lives in TA? And secondly, there were a lot of predictions about there's going to be a tsunami of selection problems around the corner for us. Now, the first topic, I could cover a whole session on its own, so I'm going to focus on how real was that tsunami of selection problems that were predicted a year ago. So we need to understand the fact from the fiction. Some of you may be wondering, what's Taylor Swift got to do with all of this? Well, it happened because I was talking to my 25-year-old daughter a week ago, and I said to her, oh, I'm going to be going to this conference, and I'm going to be talking about a global phenomenon who has a huge impact on everybody's lives. And she immediately said, well, Taylor Swift, Dad. I said, sadly not, but I will try and find a way of getting her into my presentation. So if we want to understand the fact from the fiction, there were two big predictions last year. One was how are candidates intending to use ChatGPT, and therefore how is that going to change the way that they did job applications. Well, we had some research on that which we shared at the time with very high expectations of people's usage around this. But one of the interesting things was not just usage, but the point here about a third would not work for an employer who banned GenAI use. So candidates were very clear from the beginning that they saw it like a calculator. It was a useful tool, and therefore why would you ban their use of it? But there were some really important undercurrents to that research too that we needed to understand. And it turned out that there was higher adoption of ChatGPT by Black heritage students, so higher than it was for their white peers. Neurodiverse people suddenly realized actually if you're dyslexic or dyspraxic, this was an incredibly useful tool to help you in your job application. And then there was another thing there around the number of people that were using the premium version of ChatGPT. So ChatGPT 4 was being used by people from a higher socioeconomic status background. And of course, the premium version was even better than the free version. So that created some challenges. But I think for one of the most important things for me, which was very, very clear from the outset, that most candidates thought that ChatGPT would level the playing field. And that's so important to understand in terms of how students think about ChatGPT. So the second prediction was, okay, was the selection process actually vulnerable to AI? A year ago, if you were here for the conference, there was a huge discussion about that vulnerability. And the initial response, actually, from the traditional assessment sector was a bit like sort of Dad's Army, if you're familiar on that, which was, don't panic, it'll be all okay. We've got our top researchers, this is from our friends at SHL, who had a look, had a little play around with some basic prompts, and they discovered that actually traditional assessments were not really susceptible to ChatGPT and OpenAI. Now, we found that a bit odd and a bit strange, because if you think that GenAI tools based around LLMs as a large language model are predictive language calculators, then surely they would be good at doing a language type of test. And sure enough, there was loads of stories coming out about how ChatGPT was acing complex tests like medical exams. So if that was the information that was coming out, that it could do medical exams, legal exams, then surely psychometric assessments weren't that much different. So we decided to go and do some research with UCL. We worked with a couple of PhD students to go and really dive into what is the capability of ChatGPT in doing psychometric assessments, how easy it actually is it to use it to do that. This is all published research, so you can go online and find this information. This is not something that we've held back. We've showed exactly how we did this. And some of the results were really more surprising than we thought that they would be. So ChatGPT on a traditional verbal reasoning aptitude test, even the free version, which is 3.5 here, scored higher than 71% of candidates, easily able to pass the threshold for most early careers processes. ChatGPT 4, the premium version, was significantly better than 98% in doing a verbal reasoning. Now, the point about this is not necessarily, everybody's running out and doing this, but the vulnerability is there. And it's only getting better. We then looked at it for situational judgment tests, And it was less good, the free version, on doing those. But the premium version, again, was able to get over 70th percentile. Again, the threshold to get you through to the next stage. And ultimately, our research found that you didn't have to be a hugely experienced user of ChatGPT in order to be able to find a vulnerability in traditional assessments. And this wasn't just Arctic Shores that discovered this. SOVA, another assessment provider, a few months later, had very similar findings to us as well. So one of the things that I wanted to do was, having discovered that, was not just to, is this just Arctic Shores experiencing or thinking about this? What are some of the other thought leaders out there? What are they finding? So in my podcast, I spoke to the lovely Claudia Nutgens, who's head of assessments at Alexander Mann Systems, to ask her what was she seeing over the last 12 months around the use of ChatGPT in the processes that they run.
What we're seeing is everything on a spectrum from people. Literally, I had a client meeting last week where the client said, sorry, what? Hadn't even occurred to them.
Right.
To clients who are going, sorry, stop everything. We are not continuing. So we've got that.
Yes.
Panic, absolute like headless chicken panic to completely ignoring it. What we're trying to do is get that middle ground. So what we're trying to do is really start to say to people, right, is GenAI something you're going to be using in your organisation?
Yes.
Is it going to be used as part of these jobs?
Yes.
It's not cheating. Why is it cheating?
Yes.
It's no different to, you know, a graduate asking their mum to help them with their application. And there is a real validity problem with many of the solutions that we oversee or that we would have recommended a year ago. We have to be honest with clients, is that if you've got a simple SJT,
Yes.
as an automated first stage response, it is likely that it is very easy to complete with ChatGPT.
Yes.
So really what you're going to find is the curve is going to change. You're going to get lots of high performance. It's not going to work for you anymore.
Yes.
So that's what Claudia was finding from her own experience there. And the point, again, is that the vulnerability is there. That doesn't necessarily mean it's being activated by all students, but the vulnerability is there. And we started to see and hear from more and more people. So what started as a trickle soon became a stream of early careers teams reporting clearly that ChatGPT was being used in the process. Typically, actually initially with video interviews, there were stories increasingly of, oh, I've just watched 100 video interviews where everybody read out the exact same answer to the questions. And this was becoming more and more frequent in terms of news that was coming out. So we found that the early career sector got divided into 3 camps initially. You had those that were going to fight against the use of GenAI in the process, those who were going to freeze, I really don't know what's going on, so I'll wait to find out, and then those that thought, okay, well maybe I should embrace it. So let's sort of dive a bit into those different camps. The fight group. Okay, so I'm going to detect it, and then I'm going to deter it. And the challenge with that was the detect technology wasn't actually that good. 80% was typically the top level that a detection tool got to. So that meant 1 in 5 potentially candidates you were going to accuse of cheating who actually hadn't cheated at all. So that quickly became something that people dropped. So the next response was, okay, we're going to deter its use. We're going to make it very, very clear that nobody should be using GenAI in our application process. And if we found that you were using it, any applicant you were found of using it, you would be barred from the process. Very draconian response to it. Bear in mind the earlier research that I shared from it. I don't think that's going to last for very long. So then you had the freeze. Understandable, This is so much noise, I don't know what's going on, I don't really understand what ChatGPT is or how it's going to work. I don't know whether I should change the whole of my process, some of my process. Hopefully, it'll just go away. Life as an early careers talent recruiter is incredibly busy anyway. I'm worrying about how I'm going to get back to 11,000 candidates, let alone start changing my process. So I'm just going to sit it out and wait and see what happens. And then you had some people that thought, hang on, this is definitely going to be part of the future. I'm hearing it from leaders in my organization. Everybody's talking about, we've got to get AI into the business and how we use it. So we might as well embrace it. We might as well start thinking, how do we make our process ChatGPT friendly and ChatGPT resilient? And here is, again, I went out to go and talk to some people to find out, how are you doing this? How are you embracing the use of GenAI? And I've got a couple of clips here, one from Yaz, who's one of the sort of great thought leaders around the adoption of technology in TA, and then also Sonia Paulson, who was head of assessment civil service fast stream at the time. But first of all, Yaz.
What a beautiful problem to have. If someone said, hey, yes, I don't apply for jobs, I just press this button, I apply for 5,000 jobs. Well, a genius. Tell me how.
Yes.
Like, why
Yes.
why would I be fearful of that?
Yes.
What I need to now do is there's some work on my end, which is, okay, I can't physically go through 1 million applications a month. So what technology can I use to evaluate all these profiles? Guess what I've done now? 2 months ago, my recruiters were individually going through every single profile. Now I've got a problem that's forcing me into using technology to review it. In the end, people can either wait till they're forced to change,
Yes.
or they can start changing now.
Generative AI is here. It's already here. There is an urgency. So I think we need to embrace rather than resist. That's certainly the message that I'm giving to my teams. I think the methods that are going to be most vulnerable to the onset of, ChatGPT, Bard, AI, are the more traditional methods around CV, statement of suitability, and also verbal reasoning, situational judgment test to some extent, and numerical reasoning to some extent, all of which actually we use in the civil service and currently in the fast stream selection process, which is 5 stages. So I'm really thoughtful about those areas. I think moving away from CVs and statements of suitability to a more holistic skill task-based assessment is where we're heading. And our psychology team for the civil service at the moment is developing a new measure of behaviours that is more kind of psychometric based, but will hopefully move us away from that reliance on the CV within the application process, which I think is the most vulnerable.
So those were 2 perspectives, and I should add from people who are not clients of Arctic Shores. So sometimes I know people get sort of skeptical about this and going, well, hang on, there's always some vendor up there showing somebody who's a client, they've drunk the Kool-Aid from the vendor, and of course they're going to talk about it in that way. But neither of these people were clients of us, and I was just interested in hearing what they had to say. So, pioneers started to emerge. It wasn't just 1 or 2, it turned out to be a few more that started to think about how do we embrace GenAI. The first was Shoesmiths, who did a great job actually on their career site in giving advice to candidates as to what good and bad looks like in terms of use of GenAI. Others started to come out as well. Siemens reviewed their whole application process, again, to go and look at where could we make ChatGPT friendly in terms of allowing students to use it, while at the same time making our process resilient against manipulation. Amazon followed, interesting case with Amazon, who were looking at 10,000 video interviews and increasingly finding that students were just reading out answers to the asynchronous video questions. And so we introduced an assessment to bring that number right down in terms of video interviews that they had to look at, but also helping them think about what the design of the video interview should be. Same with EDF. And then last, which I think is quite interesting, is John Lewis. A few of you may have seen there was a a big piece on LinkedIn on that when John Lewis said, we're going to give the interview questions out in advance of candidates coming to interview an assessment centre. There was kind of uproar initially from the TA sector. You can't give interview questions out. Everybody's going to plug it into ChatGPT. You're going to get the standard answers around that. And actually, if you think about it, you can give things in advance if you give guidance. So the issue was not so much, oh, we're going to ask people or give them the interview questions in advance, and then they're going to come in and read out. We're going to tell them what good and bad looks like. And then people know. And once you give people guidance, then actually I think you can make it a very resilient process to ChatGPT. And the important thing for me is that an interview should be a discovery for somebody. It shouldn't be an interrogation. And so I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be given questions in advance. And certainly ChatGPT and AI shouldn't be one of the reasons that stops you doing that. So 1 year on, what's the state of play, and what should we be thinking about for the next 12 months? Well, first thing, the vulnerability piece hasn't gone away. This is now an academic research paper. It's been peer-reviewed, well accredited, the International Journal of Selection and Assessment. They had their own research into this, and they found there was vulnerability there. And in their conclusion from all of this research was that vulnerability is not going to go away. So it then has to be, okay, things have to change if we're going to address this vulnerability. And one of the things I like to say to people is if you think that the vulnerability is not an issue, can you imagine going to your IT department and say, I think there might be a vulnerability in our IT system, but I don't think we need to do anything about it now. They'd look at you and think you are absolutely bonkers. If you find a vulnerability, then you should at least be aware of it and redesigning your process rather than waiting for it to happen. The second thing is the use and proficiency of ChatGPT has rapidly accelerated as we thought it might do. So we now find there was a prediction that it would be 72% that would be using ChatGPT on an everyday basis a year ago, and that's now gone up to 88%. And the amount of time students are spending on ChatGPT has increased too. The really interesting thing for me is that 86% now say they are proficient in its use. We're in the world of TA, we probably played a bit with ChatGPT. We don't have the time to spend a lot of our day today on GenAI tools, but students do, and they are. And I think the final bit on this is they're not just regularly using it, but some of them are highly advanced users. They have designed their own GPTs. 1 in 5 have designed their own GPTs, which means that they're very capable of being able to use this as a tool to help them in the job application process. And we also found that actually people's intentions of using GenAI tools in the job application process was increasing. 59% now said they have or would use GenAI in the selection process. And that shouldn't really surprise any of us, because if many of students are saying this is going to level the playing field and it's like a calculator, then why wouldn't I use it to help me in a job application? Interestingly, 1 in 5, and that should be a bit of a worry for everybody here, 1 in 5 are going to use auto-apply AI. So you're going to wake up one morning and find that your number of candidates' applications have just gone up by several thousand, thanks to a lovely piece of technology that makes it easy for anybody to apply. And that is a separate kind of vulnerability that we need to think about. And many people are reporting, I've heard in this conference today, an increase in applications. And it is because it's so easy to use GenAI tools. Now, here's one of the interesting things. 17% have or would use it in an assessment. Now, if you're neurodiverse, you think it's leveling the playing field, then why not? But contrary to popular opinion, students don't see ChatGPT as a cheating tool. When the team said to me, oh, we'll ask students would they use it to cheat? And I said, nobody's going to answer that question. But actually, because it's anonymous, 8% said that, yeah, okay, we probably might look at it to manipulate the system. But 92% see it as a positive tool. And not surprisingly, because many of them have been struggling to get jobs, and so why wouldn't they look for another tool to help them improve their chances? And equally, you can see that there are others from neurodiverse who help them if they're dyslexic or dyspraxic. But here's another interesting one here. 19% know others are using it, and they don't want to be put at a disadvantage. So that is only going to increase its usage. But the thing that I said at the beginning remains true. GenAI is a leveler of the playing field. It is both perceived as such and actually delivering on that. So here the stats have really jumped up from last year. 71% of students from a Black heritage background are using ChatGPT and GenAI in the selection and assessment process, significantly higher than the white students. 66% from a neurodiverse perspective are using it to help them in their recruitment process. And when you think about how challenging it is for dyslexic, dyspraxic people to fill in long and large application forms, why wouldn't they be using it to make their lives a little bit easier? I think the final bit around this is that candidates, what their response is to the fight, freeze versus embrace camps that are out there. 16%, only 16% would be happy to join an organisation that said that they are detecting and deterring the use of GenAI, whereas 49% would much prefer an organisation that embraces it and guides them, and this is the important bit, and guides them in the use of GenAI in the application process. And that jumps even higher when you start looking at people from different demographics in this. So a year on, there really is only one camp that you can and should be in, which is you've got to embrace and guide it. That's what students are telling you, that's what actually your own business is doing in terms of how it's using GenAI in the day-to-day work. It makes no sense to do anything else. So we put together a group of podcasts on this to help you. I know it's one thing to say things are going to need to change, and then, well, how do we do it? So please do look this up. But there are 3 takeaways that I'd like you to have from today's session. First, GenAI is like a calculator. You have to understand that point. Everybody is using it. It's super easy for them to use it. And so you can no longer ignore that it's out there. You have to address that. Secondly, we must guide candidates on what good looks like and what bad looks like in the career site. If you do one thing and one thing only from this conference, is go and start planning and thinking about how you update your career site. It seems entirely unfair to me to say to candidates, we really don't mind. If you use it, great. If you don't, we don't care. Because you leave a huge number of people who are going, but hang on, is it right for me to use it? Is it wrong? What are you doing behind the scenes? Are you embracing it? What does good look like? What does bad look like? What happens if I have a friend who's got money and can use ChatGPT Premium to help them, and I can't afford that? What is the guidance from you? And most importantly, how are you going to help them use GenAI here, and how are you going to support them both in the process and potentially when they come into the organisation as well? And third, like the IT analogy on this one, your processes are vulnerable. Now, there'll be different degrees of vulnerability on this, but you have to audit them. You cannot go away from here and think everything's fine and not actually know. So we've put together, I know you're probably thinking, okay, well, how do I do all of this? This is all great stuff, Robert. Have you got any guides and tips and templates? And we have. We've spent the last 6 months putting together a bunch of guides and templates that will show you how you can embrace GenAI, how you can update your career website, what advice you can give to candidates, how do you redesign your process to make sure that it is ChatGPT friendly and ChatGPT resilient. We've got a load of those guides on the stand, so do come along afterwards and pick them up if you think that they'll be useful for you. Hope you've found this insightful, and thank you for listening.
Thanks, Robert. Unsurprisingly, lots of questions, including one which I won't ask you to answer, but at some point, why Arctic Shores?
Oh, okay.
We don't know the name. If we get time, we'll come back to that. But given that there are guides available, and I'm sure most of you will go and get them, I'm going to choose two questions that kind of come together, which is the role of HE in all of this.
Yes.
Obviously, we have universities in the audience too. So you're talking about giving guidance from a career site point of view. What can universities do to support students to either do this in the right way, or how they can upskill them maybe in the use of GenAI?
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
So, well, it's interesting. I mean, I think students will be upskilling themselves in the use of GenAI anyway. But I do think the career advisors can play a very important part on this. No doubt students will be coming in saying, okay, it's not clear on the website. Can I use GenAI or can't I? And I think you can go and look at the Shoesmith's website and a few others to see what does guidance look like. I mean, we've got our own templates as well on this, but I do think the career teams should be having a one-pager or something that is helping students work out what does good look like and what's bad look like. Because the worst thing for me is students applying for a job and not realizing that the use of ChatGPT, just copy and paste, will actually be to a detriment rather than to an advantage. And that what all of us in this room want is we want to see the authentic candidate. And the only way we can get to the authentic candidate is if we say, this is how you use ChatGPT. It can help you as a baseline in terms of coming up with your application style, responses. But then you have to put your own identity on top of it. And if you don't put your own identity on top of it, you're just going to look like everybody else. And then nobody in this room is going to be able to determine who to bring forward and who not.
Perfect, thank you. And I mean, I don't know if there is any evidence yet, but we've got questions saying, is the evidence there that those that have used GenAI in the application process are more or less successful in the role when they get there? It's too soon possibly to have any hard evidence on that anecdotally?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. Anecdotally, what we're hearing is a few of our clients talking about, or organisations talking about people turning up for interview are different from what the application form indicated. And so I think a lot of people that I'm talking to are finding that there is an issue there, that people are using it to either paint a different picture of themselves or enhance what their capabilities are. I haven't seen any studies on that. Maybe that's something the ISE
maybe. I'm not sure. Plug for the recruitment survey. I'm sure there are questions in recruitment survey.
Yeah, to do on that. But there is now whether there's a whole separate question of is somebody good at ChatGPT and learning to use it and able to use it? Will they perform well in the job? Possibly, if your job requires high learning agility. So it depends on what the job is. But I do think things like the legal sector, I've got son-in-law who's a trainee solicitor. I just think that's going to massively change in the next 3 or 4 years. You know, a trainee solicitor who used to have to go through loads and loads of stuff as part of their training, that's all going to be done by ChatGPT. So the things that you're going to want them to do and what will make them special are going to be different in the future from what it was in the past.
And I was having that conversation with somebody yesterday about, you know, the next piece of thinking we can do on this is what happens in role, obviously. I've forgotten which one I was going to ask next. No, what I was going to say was your point around the person who turns up at interview being different to the person that's put the application is, if we come back to the HE space, is one of those messages surely that we can ask, or we can work with universities to put across, because that's what they need to understand, is that that's the whole point. You get there and you've still got to be employed. You've still got to get through that last stage of assessment, which mostly, you know, if we're in assessment centre space, at some point that's going to come to light.
It is, and that's why you've got to guide them, and you've got to say, it can and should help you in some elements of the process. Yeah. But there are other bits where it won't.
Sure. And so I'm going to pick out the two top thumbs up questions in here. One is, are we saying that the CV is no more? The person who asked the question said in the next 3 to 5 years. Is it going to be sooner than that? A CV, the skill of CV writing, is that done?
I hope so. Anybody who knows me knows that the last 2 or 3 years, I've been on a huge campaign to scrap the CV. I just don't see the value that it adds anymore. We all know that the CV is something that is barely a good record of what somebody's done. You'll see a trend around skills-based hiring that is coming out now that is really starting to sort of push away from the CV as a way of understanding who you should bring forward to interview and who you shouldn't. My one tip for everybody here in this room in early careers, I think you've got a huge amount of knowledge you can give your experienced hire colleagues. They are all going to be running around like headless chickens now, talking about skills-based hiring. How do we hire for potential? What is a skill? How do you take somebody through a process of understanding what somebody's capability is when you don't look at a CV? Hello, this is what early careers have been doing for the last umpteen years. You're no longer going to be the difficult child of TA sat at the background. You're going to be the heroes now. And I think if you can think how you take what we know in early careers and share that with your experienced hires, there is a lot of value you'll be able to bring.
I want T-shirts next year. TA are the heroes, if we can. Jones, I don't know if Jones in the room, but I'm sure we can get something done on that. And then very lastly, and there's never an answer to this, but what is likely to be next? I mean, what are we seeing? What's going to, in terms of the impact on graduate recruitment or friendship recruitment?
So, I mean, you've got ChatGPT 5 coming out very soon. We already know that the GenAI tools are really good at taking images now and converting that to text. So all the things that we've been used to, that we think, oh, this won't be such a challenge, are going to be up for grabs as to how GenAI develops. I think the really important thing is to be users of the technology, and really proper users of the technology. Many of your organisations may even have created and introduced GenAI tools. I think for me, one of the next steps on the, and I heard somebody about this yesterday talking about this in the recruitment selection process, is how could you, at an assessment centre, for example, enable people to, as part of a task, to be using a GenAI tool so that they walk away going, okay, whether I got the job or I didn't, but I saw some really good ways that you could apply the use of GenAI in the workplace by going through the assessment centre. So I think we can embed it into the selection process to educate and support students rather than just assess them.
Sounds like a lovely place to end. Thank you very much, Robert. A final round of applause if you wouldn't mind. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
Really appreciate that.